Good afternoon, dear participants. Can you hear my voice?
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Is my voice
Yes,
clear?
ma'am.
Good afternoon,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yeah. Nice meeting you all once again in this afternoon session. Yeah. So, as per the contents which are there, we discussed Ferdinand de Saussure in our earlier session, right? The three lessons of Ferdinand de Saussure we have completed, and lesson 1 and 2 of background is being completed. 1 second, please.
Recording stopped.
Sorry, something urgent. Yeah. So today we shall discuss on, I think, a bit of tradition and individual talent by T.S. Eliot was also discussed when we're trying to discuss new criticism, right? In the first session of our class. And today we shall move on to, if you want exactly the lesson number, it is like lesson 14 and 15 on your instruction material. And the title of today's discussion is The Death of the Author. Okay, Death of the Author by Roland Barthes. So that is a topic we are discussing today. Is that clear? So in order to preserve our time, we will start few PPTs and then we shall discuss them point wise. Are you listening?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. Is the screen visible?
No, ma'am.
No. How about now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I don't know why this screen is coming. Yeah. So as per your instruction material, it is unit 3, lesson 14 and 15, Roland Barthes, The Death of the Author. Okay, that is what we are sharing, okay, in this afternoon session. And as you are aware that these afternoon 2 sessions are I think I'll be doing those 2 sessions and I will try to discuss all the points which I told in my earlier session that I would be sharing in terms of this particular paper. Okay, so this for this first session we shall discuss these 2 lessons 14 and 15, and if time permits we shall also discuss psychoanalytical theory lesson 3 of your unit 1. Okay. Okay. So, Roland Barthes' essay, The Death of the Author, was published in 1968. Okay, and it was a very influential essay which has come in terms of the challenges that Barthes is trying to portray in terms of in the modes of understanding, writing, and reading. Okay, so in this essay, which seems or which is always significant in criticism theory, okay, a particular paper which talks about what the critical aspect of literature. This essay by Barthes stands as a very influential essay. Why does it stand as an influential essay? Because Barthes challenges the traditional modes. Barthes challenges the traditional modes of understanding, writing, and reading. Okay, so what do I mean by challenge? Challenging of traditional modes. Okay, that of course that is extensively discussed in terms of elements from myth and mythology as the essay goes on. So this particular essay contains both structuralist and post-structuralist arguments. Okay, so we will see them. How does it talks about the structuralist argument and how this particular essay contains certain elements of post-structuralism. Okay, and the focal point in this particular essay is it's about the relationship between the author and the text. Okay, the relationship between the author and the text. You see the title, The Death of the Author. You know the concept of death, right? Okay, so if you go into the philosophical, theological, or physical aspects of the word, we understand its significance in our day-to-day life, right? And the title, okay, has lot of interpretations. And Barthes, through this particular essay, is challenging certain modes of understanding the writing and reading technologies. Yes. So this particular essay is exclusively about the relationship between two. Okay. One, the author, and the second one is the text. So you cannot imagine the text without the author. Okay. Sometimes even if you say it is an anonymous text, we just don't know the name, but it is there. There is some author who is behind that particular text. Okay, so this particular essay of Barthes focuses on the relationship between the author and the text. Okay, did you follow this slide?
Ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So what is the basic argument in the essay which stands as a focal point? Anyone
Between
know?
the author and the text.
Okay.
Structuralist and post-structuralist.
Yeah. Okay, so challenging certain modes and portraying the relationship between the author and the text through certain arguments called structuralist and post-structuralist arguments. Okay. Now, there are different perspectives. Okay, I said essay talks about the relationship. Okay, we know mother and father relationship, we know daughter and son relationship, right? We know brother and sister relationship. So basically the human understanding of relationship is very significant, right? But in this particular essay, when Barthes is talking about a relationship, okay, he is trying to give us a relationship between the author and the text. Okay, and then he says there are certain perspectives, okay, different perspectives on which this relationship works. Okay, so authors are seen as creators and producers of text. Okay, so what is the place of an author in this relationship? They are, what are the words which I have highlighted in this particular statement?
Creators, producers.
Okay, just
They
imagine.
are the author and the producers.
Okay, author's position is in the position of the creator and in the position of the producer of the text. But, okay, again there is a conditional clause. But authors and texts are also products of histories. Products of histories and products of social and economic process. Okay, so when we say if an author has written in this particular time, we cannot deny the fact, the historical fact which is built around that particular text. We cannot also deny the social and economic facts which are around that particular text. Okay, so the authors and texts are the products of histories, social and economic processes. So we know about the societies. Okay, societies starting from pre-literate societies and the literate societies which are now. Okay. So in pre-literate societies, there is no concept of author. Author exists only when there is a literary work. Okay, but can you imagine an author in a society where there is no literature at all, where there is no writing system at all? Okay, so in pre-literate societies, there is no concept of the author. Okay, so orature is something, a study which talks about, which discusses the oral narratives. Okay, starting, because now it is documented starting from okay, the ancient literary forms, we see how orature plays a significant role. Okay, so if that is the case, how do we understand the relationship between the author and the text? So all these are perspectives in terms of the relationship between the author and the text. Okay, so the basic fact which we are trying to emphasize here is we are looking at, when we are looking authors as creators, okay, then we cannot deny the fact that authors were also contextualized in the historical, social, and economic processes. Okay, and we cannot also deny the fact that author exists only when there is a literate societies. Okay, then what is this very complex relationship that we could see between the author and the text? This is a fundamental question we pose. Okay, is the author the sole creator of the text? Okay, or is the author the source of its meaning? Okay, is the author the creator of the text, or is the author himself is a source of meaning of that particular text? So after going into this fundamental question, then is text a product of other texts? Okay, so this is when we say a text is a product of other texts, we cannot deny about intertextuality. Okay, or is it autotelic? Auto, okay, autonomy, okay, autonomous college or autonomous university having its own power. Okay, if the text, if we say that it is a product of other texts, then we have to consider the fact of intertextuality. Or if we say that it is autotelic, okay, that is a text exists by itself, okay, or text existing for itself. Okay, this is another question we have to ask when we consider the author as the sole creator of the text, or when we consider the author as the source of its meaning. Okay, or the next question that arises is it a reflection of society? Okay, if a text is written, okay, you have a lot of texts which are related to different concepts which are there in the which are still existing in the society. Okay, so when we say or talk about such type of concept, okay, concept based what literature, then are we not considering society? Okay, is it a reflection of society? So all these are the very perspectives, okay, that should be there in our mind, or of course, as the author says in this particular essay. So in order to understand these questions, okay, or in order to get an answer from these type of statements, there are certain schools of criticism that emerged. Okay, and all these mentioned here. Okay, can any one of you read these schools of criticism mentioned in the slide here? One of you please unmute yourself.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Historicist,
Okay.
new critical,
Okay.
Marxist,
Mm-hmm.
structuralist,
Mm-hmm.
post-structuralist,
Mm-hmm.
psychoanalytical.
Analytical. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. So these schools of criticism, okay, they tried to explore, okay, all these questions, okay, about the relationship between the author and the text, and justifying if the author is the sole creator, then what is the result? Okay, is it reflecting his own personality, or is it reflecting a society in which he was living, or is it trying to connect it with the text which was already existing during that particular period? So all these questions, okay, in order to answer all those questions, these schools of criticism have emerged. Okay, these are the schools of criticism. They tried to explore and theorize. Okay, say for example, if I have to solve or get an answer for 2 plus 3 whole square, okay, I have to know the formula of a plus b whole square. Okay, so without knowing the formula, I can't solve my problem, right? Or see, that's a very logical and fundamental understanding of any things. Okay, starting from what the basic reading or general knowledge or logical knowledge. So something emerged because there must be some answer to the question. Okay, so all these schools of criticism, they try to explore and theorize the relationship. Okay, relationship between author, text, and society. Okay, when this question arises, and a question leading to if the author is autotelic, okay, or if the author is talking about the society in which he was living, all this led to certain schools of criticism. These schools of criticism started theorizing the relationship. Okay, the relationship between these three elements: the author, the text, and the society. Is that clear? Shall I move on to the next slide?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
That's good. Now, this is one type of criticism, okay, where because we are concentrating on the relationship between author and text, okay, we are trying to view this particular criticism. Okay, it is called biographical criticism. Okay, biographical criticism, where the focus is on the biography of the author. Okay, the biography of the author was viewed as a very crucial element to understand the meaning of a text. Okay, so any common sense view will say that definitely in this type of criticism, author is the creator. Okay, and we have an example here. This type of criticism emerged during this particular period. If you in your first year, you must have come across periods of English literature. Okay, and in that you must have come across this particular period. Okay, the Romantic period, where the approach which is seen in this particular period is a biographical approach. Now, if you have an instruction material in front of you, you please turn to page number 145. Okay, where there is a quote of S.T. Coleridge, okay, on page 145, where the author in the Romantic poets, okay, he was seen as a figure whose literary creativity was it's like a divine creation. Okay, and that is why Samuel Taylor Coleridge, in his Biographia Literaria, okay, the work is called Biographia Literaria. He tries to use the analogy of the creation, to describe the poetic process. Okay, and that's why I said it is a divine creation. And this particular approach, okay, the biographical approach, can you read that quote, please, on page 145? By
Yes,
Samuel
ma'am.
Taylor Coleridge in Biographia Literaria, where he uses the analogy of creation as a poetic process.
Yes. Shall I,
Yes,
madam?
please read.
The imagination then I consider either as primary or secondary. The primary imagination I hold to be the living power and prime agent of all human perception, and as a repetition in a finite mind of the eternal act of creation in the infinite I am.
Okay, so finite and infinite, mortality and immortality. Okay, so the imagination I consider, either it is a primary or a secondary imagination. Okay, there is a power. Okay, there is a prime agent of all human perception, whatever might be the human perception. And how is that perception? It is like a repetition of a finite mind, of an eternal act of creation. Okay, so Samuel Johnson, okay, in the 18th century, he is considered to be a classic of biographical criticism. Okay, he is considered as a classic of biographical criticism, especially when he approaches the works of poets through their biographies. Okay, and the title is entitled as The Lives of Poets that came in between 1779 to 81. Okay, the author continues to give important presence in the in terms of criticism, in its be it a historical or biographical. Okay, especially in the 19th and early 20th centuries. So this is the focal point of the biographical criticism. So we have seen how we are trying to see, okay, the relationship between the author and the text, and we are looking at certain approaches which talks about those relationships, and we have approached to one particular type of criticism where we see the biography of the author as an important approach. Okay, biographical approach as an important aspect, where Samuel Johnson, who is considered to be a classic of biographical criticism through his work, The Lives of the Poets. Okay. Then you have new criticism and formalism. New critics were anti-historicist. Okay, here, if you could see here, we looked the important presence in criticism, be it historical or biographical. Okay, in the 19th and the early 20th centuries. Okay, or the Romantic period biographical approach of Samuel Taylor, Coleridge, and Samuel Johnson's. But you see here, new critics, they were anti-historicist, okay, who viewed text as autotelic. Now, author is not autotelic here. Okay, text is autotelic. New critics looked text as an independent entity. Okay, new critics looked text that should exist by itself, text as autotelic, okay, and independent of the author and their location, either author and his or her location in history or society. So author's biography, author's historical elements, author's period in which he or she was living is not considered as important as per new critics or new criticism as a theoretical approach. Okay, so here the meaning of a text, okay, the meaning of a text is seen as an important argument of the new critics. Okay, the new critics saw that there was no need to go outside the text to get its meaning. Okay, to justify that, you can see the example which is there on page number 145 of your instruction material, where there is a mention of William Emerson and where there is a mention of T.S. Eliot. Okay, and in our first session itself, when I discussed new criticism, I was focusing on this point of how T.S. Eliot is considered as an important critic of new criticism. Okay, so T.S. Eliot in Tradition and Individual Talent, He also addresses the question of the author and the work when he talks about the impersonality of the author. So T.S. Eliot says the act of writing is not expression of personality. The act of writing is an escape from personality. Okay, that is his argument. So new critics' focus was on the meaning of the text, and text itself contains the meaning. A reader, excuse me, a reader may not go outside the text to get its meaning. Okay, so new critics were anti-historicists who viewed texts as autotelic. Is that clear? Shall I move? Shall I move to the next slide?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Then we come on to formalist criticism. Okay, formalist criticism focused on the text and its form. If you could see form, okay, form itself talks about the type of criticism that we are trying to discuss. Okay, so focused on the text and its form rather than the author. Okay, though we see lot of concerns of Russian formalists. Okay, and we see they were trying to argue that words on the page have no meaning by themselves. Okay, and since they refer to the reality outside. Okay, so now what is the focus as per formalist criticism? The focus is on the form of the text. Okay, and they argue that those form, okay, the words on the page, they don't stand independent for themselves. They have to refer to the reality which is outside. And we have an example here of Bakhtin. Okay, Bakhtin, a Russian linguist whose association is was very extensive in terms of this particular type of approach. Bakhtin sees language as dialogic. Okay, dialogic, that is, an utterance is never a product of an already given autonomous individuality. Okay, but is always in relation to other utterances, situated with other diverse social contexts. To make it very simple, you just look at here. Okay, his basic argument is he draws our attention to the society. The earlier approach, okay, looks at the biography where author is seen as a creator. Then the next approach talks about how meaning of a text itself is enough. We need not go outside to get its meaning. Then it is followed by certain type of argument where it says form is essential. Okay, where form is essential, and the person, a critic who could be quoted here is Bakhtin. Okay, and his concept of polyphony. Okay, please mute yourself. Who is that? Please mute. Okay, how many of you have mobile phone? Okay, the question should be like this. How many of you don't have a mobile phone? I don't think so. Not even a single person will raise his or her hand saying that I don't have a mobile phone. And what is the purpose of phone? Because I want to draw attention to this concept of polyphony. I'm trying to discuss that point. It might be very nonsensical, but still we have to discuss it to understand it in a better way. What is the function of a mobile phone?
Communicate, ma'am.
We communicate. How do you communicate? How does the communication takes place?
By calling.
Through language.
By
By texting.
no, let us focus on the sound only, okay? Because phone communication through certain speech sounds, right? And thanks to the technology now, we can also make some video calls, look at our friends, family members, and talk to them and feel as if they are in front of us, right? So when Bhaktin brings in the element of language, okay? So language in Bhaktin's argument is language is nothing but it is a product of a society. It is not a product of an individual. Okay, so he brings in the concept of polyphony. Okay, poly, many. Okay, phone, sound, phones, phonemes, right? Phonetics, phonology, phoneme. Okay, related to study related to some sounds. So just through this concept of polyphony, okay, Nagamani, please stop drawing. It's a term from Western classical music referring to many sounds. Okay, polyphony, a term that is taken from the Western music, classical music that refers to many sounds. Okay, that Bhaktin used it as number one. These sounds of these musical sounds were used in studying language in a novel. Okay, it refers to the presence of a multitude of voices in novelist discourse. Okay, hence the idea of polyphony. Hence the idea of multiplicity of voices. Okay, when there are multiplicity of voices, there is a problematization. And what is problematized now? Problematized the idea of authorial voice. So whatever the author says through that particular text is not final. Okay, whatever author says through that particular text or whatever author might have imagined or experienced through that particular text is not final. It has a multiplicity of voices. Okay, so this problematization in a novel through the idea of polyphony is an important concept, okay, in Bhaktin's theoretical argument of language that is seen as a product of society. Is that clear? Are you having your lunch?
Yes, ma'am.
You are having your lunch, so you can't answer. Okay. Next. Then the next theory is reader response theory. Now how is the focus shifted? Now the focus is shifted away from the author. In the earlier one, we see author's voice is not the final voice. it will have multiplicity of voices through that particular novel or the work of art through the concept of polyphony, that is an iconic what introduction by Bakhtin's argument in terms of language and society. Okay, but here when we look at this particular theory called reader response theory. Now, can you imagine something from this theory? In continuation of multiplicity of voices of Bakhtin's argument. Hello, all of you are taking a nap?
No,
Or
ma'am.
listening
No, ma'am.
or listening to the class?
Taking snap, madam.
Taking snap, not nap, right? If you take snap, okay. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, can you give me some points from this slide?
Should we read the slide, ma'am?
No, I am asking you what is reader response theory? What are your points on reader response theory?
Different readers respond in different ways.
Okay.
When we read something, different persons imagine different things.
Okay.
Different perspective will be there while reading a story. Someone might relate to their own life. Someone might imagine. Someone might go to another world of imagination, but someone can relate to their own life. And someone might try to imitate. They want to be like the characters in the story.
The reader try to critic, madam.
Okay. How do I have to stop my video now?
According to this theory, ma'am, there will be no particular meaning, and that meaning will be understood only by the reader only. Different readers will think in different way.
Okay.
So
that's
according to
fine.
this theory, okay.
Okay. One of you please take a turn to read point wise. Okay. And let me see. Please.
Response theory shifted the focus away from the author. Insights of Roman Ingarden and Wolfgang Laser reject the idea that text embodies a meaning which the author has achieved through his or her writing. They argue the text has no prior existing meaning, but the meaning is produced by the reader through acts of reading. Hence, there is no single original or correct meaning, but a plurality of meanings. The reader is not the consumer, but the product of the text. Example, David Bleach, Norman Holland, and Stanley Fish.
Good. Okay. Now, am I visible?
No, ma'am, you are not visible.
Okay.
No,
Thank you.
no.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, you please go to your instruction material, which has a justification of these points. Okay, there is a mention of Stanley Fish. Did you finish that essay? Stanley Fish essay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, can please narrate me what is there in Stanley Fish? Is there a text in this class? And then we shall discuss this point. Any one of you, please unmute yourself and tell me Stanley Fish and his contribution to theory part, so that I will talk about this slide.
This slide we understood, ma'am.
You to tell me about Stanley Fish. Okay.
Stanley Fish proposed this theory. Is there a text in this class? He one day, one of his colleagues was asked by their student that is there a text in this class, to which he proposed three possibilities of questions. The first possibility is that is there a text in this class with reference to the first day of the class? Next one is there a text in this class with reference to the disputed issues in contemporary literary theory? And the third one is there a text in this class in context like I think I left my text in this class. Have you seen it? Is there any text in this class?
Okay, what did he conclude?
Interpretation of the text is different, madam.
Okay. Any more points? Okay, so as per your discussion until now about the essay, is there text in this class? We see how this particular theory is in significance, right? Where interpretations of the text differ from the three questions which your friend already spoke. So through this reader response theory, the reader response theory shifted the focus away from the author. Okay, and it gave its insights of these two critics, okay, Wolfgang Esser and Roman Ingarden, okay, where they reject the idea. And what is the idea that was rejected by them? That a text embodies, okay, a meaning which the author has achieved through his or her writing. Okay, they rejected this idea of the author's meaning. So they argue that the text has no prior existing meaning, but the meaning is produced by the reader through certain acts of reading. Okay, so there is no single original or correct meaning. Okay, one text will not produce only one meaning, or if that one meaning which is produced through that particular text doesn't mean is the ultimate meaning of the text. Therefore, the focus is away from the author, and we see how plurality of meanings exists in a text. So the reader is not the consumer, but the reader is the producer. Okay, through this particular theory called reader response theory, we look at a reader as the producer of the text, not the author. The reader is not the consumer, but the producer of the text. So these are few examples of how these are few critics who spoke extensively on this reader response theory. And thanks to the instruction material that you have a detail of Stanley Fish essay. Okay. Now coming to, so all these points you will see in the first lesson of Roland Barthes, which is there on instruction material, and the next part you will see it as a actual essay, what is spoken in that particular essay. Okay, so coming to Roland Barthes, okay, Roland Barthes period from 15 to 80 is a most influential French literary critics. Okay, and he's an influential literary thinker of 20th century. And we see a lot of shifts and turns in his career, and hence we see him as a mythologist, we see him as a novelist, we see him as a structuralist, we see him as a post-structuralist, we also see him as a semiologist. Okay, so Roland Barthes, as an important 20th century thinker, critical thinker, okay, had an immense contribution in terms of critical understanding of the text. Okay, so his earliest work in criticism is this, Writing Degree 0, which has come in 1953. And it is a sort of response. Okay, Writing Degree 0 is a type of a response to Sartre's question of literary form. Okay, his question of literary ideology. Okay, and as I told you, because of his shift in career, okay, then we see him as a mythologist, novelist, structuralist, post-structuralist, and semiologist. And all these made him to contribute to this discourse. And these are his works because of his shifts and turns as a thinker of 20th century. So there is a work called Mythologies. There is a work called Elements of Semiology, Empire, okay, as a image music text. Okay, so these are his works. So in his works, especially in his early works, we see Barthes advocated a systematic and scientific approach. A systematic and scientific approach to cultural phenomena. Okay. Please stop drawing on the slides. Okay. And he was instrumental in popularizing one particular science. And what is the science? That science is called semiology. And what is this semiology? Semiology is the study of signs, S-I-G-N-S. Somebody is putting a sign here, arrow mark. This is a sign, okay, which is in blue and which is in red here. So he was instrumental critic in popularizing this concept of semiology, okay, where his advocation was a very systematic and scientific approach to a cultural phenomenon. And later on, we see his later works moved away from structuralist position of earlier days towards post-structuralist perspective. Okay, and these were under the influence of course, Derrida, Lacan, and Foucault. So towards the last years of his career, we see Barthes produced works which were highly idiosyncratic. Okay, and these works really challenge the conventions of literary criticism, okay, biography, fiction, and non-fiction. Now, Barthes and structuralism. Okay, structuralism as a lesson which is introduced to you in the unit 1 is again an extension of whatever we are discussing here in this slide. Okay, so concentrate. So, Barthes and structuralism, if we consider that in this particular work called Mythologies, okay, Barthes uses insights of Saussurean linguistics. Saussurean linguistics to critically analyze. Okay, you must remember what is Saussurean linguistics after discussing the object of study in my earlier lessons. Okay, one full lecture on Ferdinand de Saussure. Okay, where Saussurean linguistics to critically analyze the modern mythology of French bourgeois culture. Okay, so in this particular work called Mythologies, Roland Barthes is trying to use the insights of Saussurian linguistics, okay, and he is trying to analyze with the with the modern mythology techniques, okay, and trying to give us an interpretation of a certain type of culture. And what is that culture? It's a French bourgeois culture. So Barthes considers myth as an ideological process. Okay. And Barthes considers, when he considers myth as an ideological process, which works by presenting cultural specific objects. Cultural specific objects and relations as if they were timeless, as if they were natural, and as if they were unquestionable. If you see a bourgeois culture, okay, you must consider it as a timeless, you must consider that culture as natural, you must consider that culture as unquestionable culture. So by saying this, he is trying to bring very cultural specific objects and its relations in a type of ideological process. Okay, so in mythologies, by using Saussurian's linguistics, okay, to deconstruct the notion of French bourgeois culture, he employs this concept of semiology. He uses semiology to study mythologizing nature of modern French culture. So he is trying to give a structuralist interpretation of literature. Okay, so structuralist interpretation of literature dispenses with the idea of the author. And what is dispensed? The idea of the author as a creator of a work. And what happens instead of that? The focus is on the structure of signifiers which generate meaning. Okay, so if there is a certain signifier, okay, an iconic personality which is in front of who is in front of us, and that stands as a signifier which generates certain meaning in our mind. So structuralist interpretation of literature rejects the idea of the author as a creator of a work and focuses its shift on the structure of signifiers. Why signifiers? Again, because you have to connect it, because his connection with Saussurian linguistics, he brings in this element of signifier and signify. Are you following?
Yes, ma'am.
Unfortunately, I can't see any of your faces. I don't know what is happening. Okay, we end up shouting.
Taking rest time.
Taking rest. Okay. So structuralism analyzes how meaning depends upon the codes. Codes that are produced by earlier discourses. Okay. So the text does not have meaning by itself, but only in relation to the conventions of reading. Okay, the text does not have meaning by itself, but only in relation to the conventions of reading. So this type of interpretation you'll see on page number 148. Okay, where he brings in a very significant method called Barthes method of reading, where he brings us an example of an onion. Okay, where he talks about how the reader is not a consumer but a producer of the text. Okay, a text according to Barthes is like an onion. Okay, as you peel, you see fragments of it coming. Okay, so Barthes method of reading involves breaking the text into fragments or lexias. Okay, so these lexias rely on certain codes, and these codes are the products of culture. And of course, the reader has the knowledge of these codes. Okay, so if a paper like Indian writing in English is taught at distance education, you know how well you understand those texts because you can contextualize yourself in those particular places. Okay, you know certain lexias, okay, that rely on certain codes which stand as the products of a culture. Okay, and definitely the reader has the knowledge of those codes. If I start teaching you European classics in translation, or if we start discussing something, of course, British literature now it has become a very common part of our because English, we can't deny that fact. Okay, so Barth's method of reading involves breaking the text into fragments. Okay, and these fragments rely on certain codes, and those codes stand as the products of a certain culture. And therefore, the reader has a knowledge of those codes. So the text does not have the meaning by itself, but it always stands in relation to the conventions of reading. Okay, so this particular approach talks about how meaning depends upon the codes that are produced by the earlier discourses. So the breaking of the text appear to be a sort of close reading. Okay, not skimming, but something like scanning. Okay, if you go for scanning, you know what is a problem, and therefore the doctor will identify the problem, and as per that problem, you will be medicated, right? And you will be, a prescription is written, and therefore you will take your tablets. And then when you finish your course, you are again a healthy human being, right? So when the breaking of the text takes place, it is like a sort of close reading, okay, where it is different from a new critical method, okay, where it does not seek to identify a unified meaning. New critical approach also says that close reading is essential, but it stands different from that new critical method because it does not seek to identify a unified meaning. New critical approach doesn't look at meaning in a unified way. So in this particular work, and as said, Barthes attempts a sustained line-by-line analysis of Balzac's novella. Sarrazin is a novella, and with the help of this particular novella, he is trying to establish it as an intertextual construct. Okay, why intertextual construct? Because he looks this particular novella as a product of various cultural discourses. Sarrazin is looked as an intertextual construct, okay, Balzac's novella Sarrazin, okay, where it establishes a very intertextual construct, okay, and which is seen as a product of various cultural discourses. Now, what do you mean by intertextuality? Intertextuality, definitely it is a very significant term that was popularized by Julia Kristeva, a French critic, okay, where it refers to the way a text meaning is mediated. Okay, the way a text meaning is mediated by various codes which writers and readers possess as members of a particular society. Okay, see, there are certain codes. If my eyes are there, I am looking. Okay, my eyes are permissible only to look. Okay, if you want me to listen to my eyes, I can't. Okay, of course, if you go into metaphorical sense, that is different. But what does Kristeva means by intertextuality? Okay, it is a way in which a text meaning is mediated, and this text meaning is mediated by certain codes which writers and readers possess by virtue of being members of a particular society. Okay, so we see Barth's interpretive method rejects the role of the author. Okay, so Barth notes that the author has always functioned. The author has always functioned within a capitalist society. Okay, and within a capitalist society, we see how
हाँ फिर तुम लाने में इतनी देर करे पैदल जाते जी कोई देर हो रही पहले नहीं एक नहीं आ रहा
Arshia, please mute yourself. Okay, so Barth is trying to look at how the author has always functioned within a capitalist society as an ideological figure. Okay, and as an ideological figure with certain proliferation of meanings. Okay, so ideology is nothing but a set of ideas, okay, held by a particular group, and it also refers of how we look at certain things. It refers certain way of looking things, okay, where the author is posited at the center of the work, okay, and the origin of all the work's meaning are towards that. Okay, and it also talks about how the interpretative acts are directed through that within that ideological framework. Okay, so in this particular essay, The Death of the Author demystifies this thought. Okay, demystifies this proliferation of meaning. Okay, so this particular essay is appeared in Image Music text of Roland Barthes. And in this essay, you see Barthes interrupts the very traditional critical practice of invoking the author, critical practice of invoking the author to throw light on his
Recording in progress.
in his or her work. Okay, so Barthes does not concede any prior existence to the author. So Barthes' transition from structuralism to post-structuralism can be seen in this particular essay. So it's like a journey for Barthes in this particular essay, okay, by invoking certain what interruptions the traditional critical practice, okay, through this particular work of art. So it's like a transition for this author from structuralism to post-structuralism. And apart from demystifying, okay, apart from demystifying the author, Barthes articulates his ideas. Okay, what is mystifying and demystifying? What do you mean by mystical element and mystery and
Supernatural element.
So here, do you see any demystifying or supernatural mystifying elements in this essay? Mystifying is something which you said, okay? So in this particular essay, apart, in addition, besides demystifying the author, he is trying to articulate his own ideas on the indeterminacy of meaning. Okay, there is no determined meaning, indeterminacy of meaning. Okay, and how does he do? He tries to deconstruct. So there is another argument which comes here, deconstructionist argument. This is another theory called deconstruction, is another theory, a theoretical approach, which brings in about a continual difference of meaning. Okay, deconstruction. So from structuralism to post-structuralism to deconstructionism. where when he talks about the argument of difference of meaning, he highlights an important concept. Okay, two important concepts in this particular essay. One is the scriptor and text. Now, author is gone, scriptor and text. He highlighted these concepts in this particular essay through his deconstructionist argument, focusing on the continual difference of meaning. Okay. Now, how does he justify that? Okay, so he brings in the question of the author in again the same work, Sarrazin. Okay, Barthes begins his essay with few lines from Balzac's novel, okay, Sarrazin, where you see the male protagonist, Sarrazin, okay, admiring the beauty of Zambinella. Okay, and now who is Zambinella? Is a castrate. Okay, whom again Sarrazin mistakes for a woman. Okay, Sarrazin admiring the beauty of Zambinella, okay, who he mistakes Zambinella as a woman, and therefore this is a remark. Can you read this quote, please?
Shall I, ma'am?
Yes, please.
It was woman with her sudden fears, her irrational whims, her instinctive fears, her unprovoked bravado, her daring, and her delicious delicacy of feelings.
Okay. Okay. Now, can you tell me who this description is about, a man or a woman? Who is described here?
Zambinella.
Okay. So Zambinella as a woman or a man?
He mistakes as a woman, but he is a man only.
Okay, so that is a basic point now. So with this few lines, okay, it was woman with her sudden fears, her irrational whims, her instinctive fears, her unprovoked bravado, her daring, and her delicacy of feelings. See the description, delicious delicacy of feelings. So this description is a mistake for a woman that comes as a remark, okay, from the protagonist. So with this quote from the essay, Barthes is trying to challenge, okay, Barthes challenges the reader to identify who is the real speaker. Okay, now he challenges the reader to identify the real speaker. Okay, and that's how where did I? This is where we are, no? Yeah. So Sarrazin is a story that problematizes the notions. And what is the notion which is problematized here? The notion of identity. Okay, for mistaking as a woman. So Barthes devoted his book, okay, Sarrazin, entirely to the analysis of this intrigue work of Balzac. Now, you know, Balzac is a very significant French novelist, okay, and of course a playwright who has a very keen observation about the society, okay, the details of the society, where Balzac regarded as one of the founders of realism in European literature. Okay, in the broad area of European literature, we see the role of Balzac as an important French novelist, but has a keen observation of the society, especially in terms of European literature. And therefore, he is considered as one of the founders of realism, an important concept in European literature. Okay, so we see Barthes introduces this idea of multiplicity of voices. Now, you must also recollect the concept of bhakti. Okay, What is the concept of Bhaktin, which talks about the
Polyphony.
polyphony. Okay, so we see how Barthes introduces the idea of multiplicity of voices that parallels with the Bhaktin's concept of polyphony. Okay, and what happens now with this multiplicity of voices? We see the real or original voice is impossibility. Okay, by multiplicity of voices or by the polyphony, we don't see the real voice. We don't listen to the real voice, or we don't hear the original voice. Therefore, real and original voice remains as an impossible. Okay, original voice is impossibility. Okay, with the idea of multiplicity of voices. So what happens to the act of writing according to him? According to him, the act of writing, it's like an end to identity with the multiplicity of voices. Okay, so the act of writing, it outs an end to identity. So author in history, so he talks about author's position. The first position he draws our attention to is author in history. Okay, Barthes argues that author figure is not a timeless category, but is very much located in a specific history. They cannot say, if I ask you the period of Shakespeare, you have to mention, right? You can't say something else, okay, where you can compare him to Chaucer. Okay, so there is a time, a specific history, and we cannot deny that historical fact. Okay, but his argument, Barthes' argument is, author figure is not a timeless category, but is very much located in a specific history. Okay, so author in history is essential, and the author did not always exist, but appeared at a particular moment in European history. Okay, so the concept of author, as per Barthes' argument, is historically and culturally specific. So the author is shown as a product of philosophical and theological understanding of the individual. Okay, so we cannot deny the historical and cultural specificities of the author towards the concept of the author. So you must see that these empiricism, rationalism, okay, Protestantism, okay, all these are on the primacy of the individual, whether it is understanding nature, ma'am, I'll call you, ma'am, I'm in a class. Hello. So we see how the concept of author is historically and culturally specific, and we see how this stands as a primacy of an individual, whether it is understanding nature or understanding God's word or understanding the philosophical or theological understanding of an individual, okay, where author is shown as a product. Okay, so author in history is one argument. Then Barthes, in this particular essay, further argues the popular understanding of literature. And what is this popular understanding of literature? Popular understanding of literature is still centered on the author. Popular understanding of literature is still centered on author, his taste, author's life, author's passions. Okay. Even in criticism, we see Barthes sees the general tendency to explain in terms of the personality of the author. Okay, so the work is seen as a symptom of author's personality, and that is why critics make certain statements statements about this author, okay, called it as the failure in life. Why? Because we are looking at the personality of the author, not his work. And we also see how Van Gogh's madness. Okay, again here the emphasis, the critical emphasis, the criticism, even in criticism. Okay, where the tendency of looking at the personality of the author is very much prevalent, and that is the reason we see such statements come. Okay, we see how this Tchaikovsky's wife, his wisdom. So while explaining their works, okay, they talk about this statements, which are seen as a symptoms of author's personality. Okay, so this is a popular understanding of literature that is centered around the author, that is centered around their tastes, life, and passions. Okay, and when it comes to French literature and the author question, Barthes further argues various writers who have attempted to talk on this issue. And we have this poet, okay, Stephen Mallarmé, a French symbolist poet who focuses on language, okay, not on author. We have Paul Valéry, again another French symbolist poet who stressed on the linguistic aspect of the work, okay, and not on the author. We have again Marcel Proust, a novelist, a French novelist, who also stressed on language. Okay, so all these, okay, surrealism of course contributed the same element. Okay, who we see how finally Barthes is trying to show how Saussurian linguistics contributed to the destruction of the author with these examples of Stephen Mallarmé or Paul Valéry or Marcel Proust, where their focus is on language, okay, symbolism, okay, linguistic aspect, okay, all this. So we see Sasso's influence on the writers. And the second element which is discussed in this particular essay is author and scripter. Okay, so Barthes says removal of author, okay, transforms the modern text. What does he mean by removal of author? So the belief in the author conditioned the way a text was understood. Okay, so if I have to go into the biographical details of John Keats, then I will understand the conditioned way of understanding his poetry. Or if I have to go to the details of Wordsworth, then my reading elements are conditioned by looking at the biographical elements of the author. Okay, so removal of author transforms the modern text. Okay, that's why he brings in relationship of author and scripter. Okay, so he uses the term, the author was viewed as a past of his own book. But what happens to scripter? Instead of author, he brings in this concept of scripter. He introduces the concept of scripter in this essay. Why? Dispensing the idea of the author that carries a sense of authority. Okay, author and authority. Author and how it is conditioned to for a reader's mind to look at that particular text. Okay, so he introduces another concept of the scripter. Now, what is the function of the scripter? The function of the scripter is not to express. The function of the scripter is not to express, but only to enunciate. Okay, so the text, according to Barthes, is not a line of words that is trying to release a single theological meaning. Okay, when I say a theological statement like God is good, okay, so there are certain words in that line, and those line of words, they are trying to give us a single theological meaning. Okay, so the image of author God. Okay, so when Barthes is trying to introduce the concept of a scripter, Okay, in place of the author, we see how the text according to Barthes is looked in its multi-dimensional space. Okay, where we don't look the image of author God, but as a multi-dimensional space, a text with multi-dimensional space. Okay, multiplicity of voices. So a multi-dimensional space where a variety of writings. Okay, and of course we have to forget about this concept of original. Okay, and then you see this multi-dimensional space with the amalgamation of variety of writings. You see there is a blend and a clash. So what happens now? Now a text is like a texture. Okay, a text like texture is made up of a number of threads. You know how textures are, right? Where the involvement of the threads and the pattern. So Barthes, when he talks about what scripter, when he introduces this notion of scripter, the scripter can only make use of the already existing threads. And these already existing threads, they try to make a pattern. Okay. And for that reason, it does not have the role of a creator. Okay. So what is the scripter doing now? Scripter is trying to make a pattern. And what is, he is not trying to create something. Okay. He is making a pattern which is already in existence. Okay. There are threads which are already existed. Okay. And with the help of those existing threads, he is trying to make a pattern. And for that reason, we have to give away with the role of the creator. So what is happening in this pattern making through the multidimensional space of reading? There is a denial. Okay, the denial of the author. The denial of the author. Okay, where we also see, of course, the role of the critic also. Okay, and then at the end of the essay, okay, at the end of the essay, we see Barthes shifts the focus from the author to the reader now. Okay, and though the text derives from multiple writings which are drawn from various cultures and are in very different relations of parody, dialogue, and contest, okay, where multiplicity is focused on the reader, we see is if that is considered, it is the reader who makes the sense. It is the reader who gives multiple voices. It is the reader who gives the multiplicity of the writing. Okay, so Barthes at the end of the essay tries to shift the focus from the author to the reader. And Barthes says that unity of a text lies not in its origin, but in its destination. Okay, so the author is not a creator now. Okay, author is dead now. Okay, unity of the text lies not in its origin, but in its destination. And that's how Barthes concludes this particular essay with this phrase. And what is the phrase? Can you read this? What is it in the board?
The birth of the reader must be at the cost of the death of author.
Okay, so if you're going to Begum Bazaar and want to buy a set of bangles, if you say, "Good evening, uncle, you're handsome, can you give me a set of bangles?" Will he give us the bangles? If I have to buy the bangles. If I just say good evening and ask him to give a set of bangles, will he give me?
Size should be needed.
Oh my God, size. Okay, you took it again. Now, death of the author. Price should be paid, no? In addition to the size. Yeah. You have to pay something to get something, right? Right? See, all the efforts
Yes,
of
ma'am.
this, all these efforts of taking CD classes, okay, tiresome classes, and such a big group, and the way we have to make best use of the time which is given, and the amount of efforts which we are putting to make you to give our best to you, right? We can easily take the instruction material, page number 25, please read this and finish the class, okay? But the amount of efforts and energy which we are trying to put, okay, is only to make you see, the cost is our efforts, and what is the destination? If you present yourself well in your examination, is a destination, then we become successful in our approach of or the methodology which is involved in terms of our teaching process, right? So at the end, Marx concludes his essay by saying the birth of the reader must be at the cost of the death of the author. Okay, so this is how the essay ends. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, now we will move on to, so now you are through with unit 2, all the 3 lessons there. Unit 3, the 2 lessons which I have completed just now. Okay, then even in unit 1, you have now structuralism and post-structuralism simultaneously. I have done in when I have discussed, when I was trying to discuss the object of study, and also Roland Barthes' essay now. Okay, now let us go into psychoanalytic theory. Is that okay, or you want a break?
Break, ma'am.
Break, ma'am.
Break.
How much time?
5
minutes.
10
minutes, ma'am.
5 minutes, 10 minutes. Okay. Okay, 10 to 15 minutes. I'll also have my quick lunch. Okay, and then I'll join. Okay. So the remaining part, we are continuing whatever is there on my portion. I'll be trying to end up in today's session. So join at, it's now 3:02. So we'll join after 15 minutes. Is that okay?
Okay, ma'am.
Okay.